Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a seriously compelling intersection of political strategy, human psychology, and language. Specifically, we're looking at the Cold War phenomenon of useful innocence. We're going to dive deep into the fascinating history and the behavioral science behind how totally well-meaning people can get politically manipulated into serving agendas they would otherwise absolutely oppose. It's an incredible look at how language has evolved to describe a very specific human vulnerability, moving from intense Cold War rhetoric all the way to modern psychological science. By the end of this, you are for sure going to see propaganda in a completely different light.
Okay, let's dive into this by addressing the absolute most famous piece of political folklore surrounding this whole topic. If you've ever heard this concept discussed, you've almost certainly heard it attributed to one specific historical figure, right? Vladimir Lenin. It's a quote that gets repeated in articles, books, and heated political debates literally all the time. The story goes that Lenin cynically coined the phrase useful idiot to describe his Western sympathizers. But did he actually say it? Did the architect of the Soviet state actually coin this term? The short answer, no. And this brilliantly illustrates how myths can just totally overshadow reality. You'll hear it in debates, you'll read it in op-eds, you'll see it in best-selling books. But despite what you may have heard, historical archives contain absolutely zero direct evidence of Lenin ever uttering or writing this phrase. Zero. It is a persistent myth, an urban legend of political science that has just been accepted as historical fact over the decades. It's a real testament to how badly we want to attach a catchy phrase to a famous villain, even when the historical record completely contradicts it.
So, let's trace the actual evolution of the concept. The earliest roots go all the way back to the 1860s in British print. It appeared as this somewhat isolated sentiment about a foolish voter playing right into a political opponent's hands. And then, well, it lay mostly dormant for decades until the intense geopolitical aftermath of World War II. In 1946, the concept resurfaced in Reader's Digest, and then shortly after, in 1948, it entered the mainstream journalistic lexicon via an Italian Democratic Socialist Party newspaper called L'Umanità. They used it to describe non-communist leftists who were allying with communist factions, completely blind to the rapid power consolidation they were helping along.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that 1946 Reader's Digest article by Bogdan Raditsa. He was writing specifically about Yugoslavia under the rule of Josip Broz Tito, and he introduced a Serbo-Croatian phrase to Western readers, korisne budale. When this phrase was brought into English, it gave us the very first dual translation of the concept. It was translated interchangeably as both useful idiots and useful innocents. It's a crucial fork in the road for the language we use, capturing both the intense frustration of the critics and the genuine, albeit misguided, purity of the subjects themselves.
In its original Cold War context, this term described a very specific, tragic phenomenon. It referred to highly educated Western journalists, intellectuals, and travelers who were invited to visit the Soviet bloc. During their visits, they were selectively shown utopian Potemkin villages, essentially these fake prosperous-looking towns designed entirely to deceive them. Buying into the illusion, these individuals then returned home to free societies to sing the praises of totalitarian regimes. And in doing so, they naively ignored or overlooked mass atrocities, completely misunderstanding the dark, authoritarian reality of the regimes they were so enthusiastically endorsing.
Section 2. Anatomy of the Trap, how the manipulation blueprint actually works.
So, how exactly did these highly educated citizens of free societies fall into such a profound ideological trap? Looking at this objectively as political scientists, the classic formulation relies on a distinct three-part psychological dynamic. First, you have the actor. This is a well-meaning, highly educated citizen who often harbors idealistic or utopian leanings. Next, you have the manipulator. This is a rigid political vanguard or authoritarian apparatus that explicitly understands raw power dynamics. Finally, you have the mechanism. The manipulator cynically exploits the actor's emotional empathy, their desire to do good, or their anti-establishment bias. It's a tragic dynamic, really, because the actor genuinely believes they're fighting for justice, while the manipulator views them purely as an instrument, a disposable utility, just to achieve structural dominance.
Section 3. From idiot to innocent. Upgrading the terminology for precise analysis.
Comparing these two terms side by side shows exactly why upgrading our terminology matters so much. Labeling someone an idiot is fundamentally just a petty insult implying a permanent deficit in intelligence. But history proves that's completely inaccurate. Highly intelligent, heavily credentialed people are often the most susceptible. By shifting our language, we move away from a pejorative, mocking tone to one that's descriptive and psychological. Instead of assuming these people are just foolish, we recognize their naivete and misplaced empathy. Most importantly, calling someone an idiot just shuts down dialogue through name-calling, whereas recognizing them as an innocent gives us a powerful, objective, analytical pathway to actually study propaganda and persuasion.
To break down why innocent is vastly more precise, we have to deeply examine intent. An innocent does not act out of malice. Their core motivation is typically incredibly pure. They want to save the planet, protect a vulnerable group, or champion equality. This is fundamentally a matter of heart versus judgment. The error doesn't lie in their heart or any treasonous intent. The error lies entirely in their judgment of the systemic consequences of the movements they're supporting. This modernized term accurately targets the sophisticated architecture of influence that intentionally preys on good people.
And this isn't just a modern reframing. Right at the dawn of the Cold War in 1947, Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, a highly influential thinker in classical liberalism, gave this concept incredible descriptive accuracy. In his book Planned Chaos, he favored the concept of useful innocence, describing them as confused and misguided sympathizers. Crucially, he hit the nail on the head regarding the tragic irony at play. He recognized that these individuals would be completely horrified if they ever truly realized the actual brutal totalitarian endgame of the ideologies they were inadvertently fronting.
Section 4. Hijacking Human Biology. Weaponizing Pro-Social Empathy. This brings us to the most fascinating psychological insight of all. Why are smart people so biologically susceptible to this capture? Well, totalitarian or radical movements don't succeed by recruiting fools. They succeed by hijacking our very best biological traits. From an evolutionary standpoint, humans are hypersocial creatures. For our ancient ancestors, tribal conformity, moral signaling, and in-group protection were absolute survival mechanisms. Staying aligned with the group literally kept you alive. We still possess that deeply ingrained evolutionary wiring today. We have a fundamental, biological desire for moral alignment with our peers. Sophisticated propaganda architectures exploit these exact biological impulses, turning a person's pro-social empathy and best intentions into a weapon against systemic stability.
Transitioning from idiots to innocence moves us away from petty insults and toward genuine psychological insight. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. If human biology is hardwired for empathy, moral alignment, and tribal conformity, where might your own good intentions currently be vulnerable to manipulation? Because recognizing our shared biological vulnerabilities is the absolute first step in defending against them. Thank you for joining me, and keep questioning the structures of influence around you.